Princess Diana intended her final wishes to be simple, but the discoveries made after her death deeply surprised countless people across the world. Hidden behind her reputation as a beloved royal and a compassionate humanitarian existed a confidential, meticulously composed plan that directed how her wealth and personal items would be distributed. Yet when her last will was opened, a single unexpected detail captured everyone's attention and permanently reshaped public understanding of her narrative. Instead of allocating her assets in an ordinary fashion, everything was connected to one unforeseen individual. What motivated this decision, and what was she attempting to safeguard? Join us as we examine the particulars surrounding the sole person to whom Princess Diana bequeathed her estate, a choice that transformed everything. The marriage between Diana and Prince Charles began with an appearance of near-perfect fantasy. To external observers, it resembled the sort of fairy tale that people dream about, a youthful, lovely, aristocratic woman selected to wed England's future king. Lavish ceremonies, royal titles, sparkling jewelry, and what looked like an immaculate royal destiny were broadcast worldwide. Millions thought they were seeing a contemporary fairy tale happen right in front of them. However, behind all the royal spectacle, the reality proved far more distressing, complex, and tragic than most could envision. Well before Diana genuinely assumed the position of royal spouse, Prince Charles already possessed a profound emotional history with another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles. Considerably before Diana became Princess of Wales, Charles and Camilla had developed a close attachment, with numerous individuals believing that Camilla comprehended Charles in ways that few others could. Their relationship felt natural, comfortable, and emotionally robust. Yet royal customs and palace expectations reportedly deemed Camilla an inappropriate match from the institution's viewpoint. She did not conform to the meticulously guarded image demanded of a future queen. Consequently, Charles did not wed the woman many thought he truly adored. Then Diana appeared. Young, lovely, and aristocratic, she seemed, most critically to the palace, to match the needed image of a royal bride. She was regarded as appropriate, secure, and able to fulfill the role. That distinction would later become one of the deepest pains of her existence, as the circumstance involved not merely love, but also obligation, image, and royal expectations. For the public, the engagement was enormous news, and Diana turned into a global obsession almost instantly. Hundreds of millions worldwide watched the 1981 wedding, with crowds rejoicing, cameras flashing, and bells chiming. It was dubbed the wedding of the century. Yet even during those initial days, indicators of emotional distance were already noticeable. The marriage that appeared magical externally had fractures underneath the surface before it had entirely started. As time advanced, those fractures expanded. Diana eventually understood that Camilla had never truly vanished from Charles's life. What had formerly been a concealed emotional complication became one of the greatest origins of anguish in Diana's marriage. She reportedly found that her husband's connection with Camilla had not ended as a wife might anticipate. Instead, Diana discovered herself caught in a marriage where another woman's influence seemed impossible to eliminate. This reality caused immense emotional distress. Diana was not merely handling typical marital difficulties. She was struggling with betrayal under the continuous scrutiny of the world's cameras. Expected to grin, wave, attend royal functions, and preserve composure, she privately bore pain that grew increasingly difficult to conceal. Over time, she started realizing that her marriage was not solely about two people, but was profoundly linked to a system that frequently valued tradition and appearance over emotional truth. Eventually, Diana performed an act that made her exceptionally powerful in public view. She ceased pretending that everything was fine. Rather than quietly enduring humiliation, she let the world see that her marriage was damaged. Her suffering became public, and by doing so, she permanently altered the monarchy, becoming more than a princess. She turned into a symbol of authenticity within a system many believed prospered on secrecy. By 1996, the marriage formally concluded in divorce. Afterward, Diana's life seemed to move into a distinct phase. She appeared resolved to create something more intimate, genuine, and self-reliant. No longer similarly restricted by palace expectations, she was observed traveling, building new relationships, and recovering parts of herself that many thought had been buried under years of strain. Then arrived the summer of 1997, a period filled with photographs, news headlines, and relentless media focus. Diana's relationship with Dodi Fayed became one of the most closely followed stories on the planet. Each action seemed to spark fascination, and every vacation picture became worldwide news. It appeared that even in freedom, Diana could never completely evade being observed. On August 31st, 1997, everything shifted. Diana perished in a car crash in Paris after the vehicle she was riding in entered the Ponte El Alma tunnel at high speed while reportedly being chased by paparazzi. She was merely 36 years old. The shock was instantaneous and overwhelming. Her death did not only affect Britain, it rattled the entire globe. Millions grieved for her as if they had lost someone personally close. Flowers blanketed public areas, tears filled television screens, and her funeral became one of the most viewed events in history. Yet even after death, mystery continued to envelop Diana. Among the many inquiries people keep posing is what she precisely intended through her estate. Certain speculation has indicated that Diana might have organized her wealth and personal heritage in a very targeted manner, possibly meaning it for one specific person. Was it one of her sons? Was it both? Or could it have been someone unforeseen, even a complete stranger whose significance was never publicly comprehended? The truth stays uncertain, and that uncertainty has only added another stratum to Diana's already remarkable story. Long before she became Princess Diana, before royal titles, worldwide fame, marriage, heartbreak, or tragedy, Diana was simply Diana Frances Spencer, a young girl born into one of Britain's most influential aristocratic families. From an external view, her life might have seemed predestined for privilege, comfort, and sway, being born into wealth, title, and social standing. But from the very start, her narrative carried emotional wounds that money and status could not remove. Diana was born on July 1, 1961, into the Spencer family, a lineage deeply tied to British nobility. Her family possessed status, history, and vast social importance. Yet despite all that, her birth reportedly did not deliver the joy many might anticipate. Her parents had strongly desired a boy, especially after the tragic loss of an earlier son. The wish for a male heir was intense, and when Diana was born female, accounts indicate there was disappointment. One of the most frequently mentioned details from her early life is that she remained nameless for 7 days. While this might sound minor, many have interpreted it as highly symbolic. Instead of prompt celebration, there appeared to be uncertainty, sorrow, and emotional intricacy around her arrival. From the very beginning, Diana's life may have been molded by expectations she could never manage. Still, her childhood looked extraordinary outwardly. She grew up at Park House, situated on the Sandringham estate near the British royal family itself, meaning she was surrounded by grand homes, aristocratic customs, and direct closeness to royalty from an early age. She lived in a world most people could only imagine, playing in privileged spaces and moving within elite groups. On paper, it might have resembled an ideal upbringing, but appearances can be extremely misleading. When Princess Diana died in Paris in August 1997, the world was in shock. Millions of people were mourning. Flowers covered the palace gates, and television screens across the globe displayed endless images of grief, heartbreak, and disbelief. Most people were focused on one awful reality. Diana was gone. She was only 36 years old, and her death felt abrupt, devastating, and profoundly unfair. But while the public mourned the woman they loved, another process was quietly occurring behind closed doors. Diana had not only left behind 2 grieving sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, but also money, property, jewelry, personal belongings, and legal directives. At first, many assumed everything would be straightforward. Diana's fortune, people believed, would naturally transfer to William and Harry in a clear and affectionate manner. She had always seemed devoted to her boys, so the idea appeared obvious. Her wealth would shield them, her possessions would console them, and her legacy would stay in their hands. But things were not that uncomplicated. Diana's will had originally been written in 1993, during the painful period when her marriage to Prince Charles was already disintegrating. At that time, much of her independent money reportedly came from an inheritance left by her father, a major financial base for her. Then, after her divorce from Charles in 1996, Diana's circumstances changed dramatically. She reportedly received a much larger financial settlement, worth millions more than what had previously formed the core of her estate. Financial advisors are said to have encouraged her to properly update her will to reflect these huge changes, but she never fully did. That decision would later raise many questions. For someone as globally famous as Diana, many expected every legal detail to be carefully arranged, revised, and safeguarded. Instead, some later described her estate planning as surprisingly rudimentary. It was almost as if a woman who had spent years learning how dangerous institutions could be had somehow left behind legal documents that were not as fortified as people assumed. Because Diana was no longer a working royal, her estate did not remain sealed in complete royal privacy. Instead, it became a matter of public record. This created a painful irony. Diana had fought constantly for privacy while alive, yet after death, her financial details became open for public discussion. Her assets were examined, her choices questioned, and her final wishes became legal material. By the time of her death, her estate was reportedly worth over £21 million. Naturally, William and Harry were the primary beneficiaries, which made sense, as they were her sons and the center of her emotional world. But then another layer of complexity emerged, one that would generate controversy for years. Diana had reportedly written an additional letter shortly after signing her formal will. This letter was deeply personal. In it, she is said to have expressed wishes about her jewelry and personal possessions. She wanted her jewelry preserved for her sons, with the understanding that their future wives might one day wear or inherit those pieces. This alone carried emotional weight, especially considering how symbolic Diana's jewelry would later become. But more controversial was her reported wish that many of her personal belongings should be shared among her 17 godchildren. This detail changed everything. These were not random individuals. They were people Diana reportedly cared about deeply. The request suggested she had thought carefully not just about wealth, but about memory. She may have wanted certain people to receive meaningful parts of her life, keepsakes tied to emotion rather than financial value. However, because that letter was not legally structured the same way as her formal will, it reportedly did not carry binding legal force. This meant that the executors of her estate, her own mother and sister, held enormous power over how those wishes were interpreted. And this is where controversy grew. Reports and claims over the years have suggested that Diana's exact wishes regarding her godchildren may not have been honored in the deeply personal manner she intended. Instead of receiving meaningful treasured items chosen with care, some accounts suggest they may have received more ordinary possessions, lacking the emotional significance Diana may have wanted attached to them. Whether these decisions were practical, legal, or personal remains debated, but the result was clear. Diana's final wishes became subject to interpretation by others. Then came another major shift. Diana reportedly intended for William and Harry to gain fuller access to their inheritance at age 25. But this timeline was legally altered. Instead, access was delayed until age 30. 5 years may not sound enormous in ordinary life, but in royal life, 5 years can shape everything. This delay meant prolonged financial control over the fortune Diana intended for her sons. For some, this was a simple maturity safeguard. For others, it raised troubling questions. Why change what Diana herself had chosen? Why delay independence if she had already made her wishes known? This question has become especially significant when discussing Harry. Some have speculated that Diana may have understood, even before her death, that one of her sons might one day need greater freedom from royal systems. Whether that is true remains uncertain. But what is certain is this: Diana's death did not end complexity around her life. Even in death, questions remained about control, money, power, and protection. Her fortune was not simply money. It became part of a larger conversation about agency, maternal foresight, and whether Diana's final acts were her way of trying to protect her children from the very structures that had once left her vulnerable. To truly understand why Diana's will, estate, and financial decisions still generate so much fascination, it is necessary to comprehend the painful lessons that shaped her long before her death. Diana did not enter royal life as a hardened strategist. She entered it as a young woman who believed, or at least hoped, that love might be real. But the reality she stepped into was far more painful. At just 19 years old, Diana became ensnared in a situation where Charles's continued connection to Camilla was not merely suspicion, but became one of the defining wounds of her marriage. Diana was living inside an institution that demanded grace, image, and silence, while privately confronting emotional betrayal. Charles's continued connection to Camilla reportedly created enormous pain, and Diana increasingly realized she was not simply fighting for a husband's love. She was fighting against an entire system of silence, duty, and carefully managed appearances. This changed her. As the marriage deteriorated, Diana reportedly became more aware of how vulnerable emotional dependence could be. She began documenting, observing, and thinking differently. Public humiliation, betrayal, and institutional pressure appear to have taught her that survival required more than hope, it required leverage. When Diana eventually confronted Camilla directly, it was more than emotional pain speaking. It was a woman facing the truth she could no longer ignore. When divorce finally came in 1996, Diana secured a major financial settlement. For Diana, money was not simply luxury. It may also have represented freedom. Financial independence meant she would not need to beg the institution that had failed her. It meant options and protection. This context is why so many people later viewed her estate planning through a deeper lens. Diana had lived through betrayal not only from a marriage, but from systems larger than herself. She had seen what power structures could do, learned that titles could be removed, public image manipulated, and emotional vulnerability exploited. So when she structured wealth for her sons, some believe she may have been thinking beyond inheritance. She may have been thinking about protection. William, as the future king, was always likely to remain deeply tied to royal structure. But Harry, the younger son, occupied a different position, less central, more flexible, perhaps more vulnerable in other ways. This has fueled years of speculation that Diana may have understood her younger son could one day need greater independence. No one can prove exactly what Diana foresaw, but her life taught her hard lessons about survival. Perhaps that is why her financial legacy still matters so much. It was never just about money. It may have been about something much bigger, a mother who had learned, through heartbreak and experience, that sometimes true safety does not come from titles, palaces, or tradition. Sometimes true safety comes from having the means to walk away. In her private planning, Diana carefully arranged her estate to protect her children's future. Most of her wealth was placed into trusts for Prince William and Prince Harry. This meant they would be financially secure, but they would only access the money at the right time in their lives. This structure was meant to protect them and guide how they would receive their inheritance. Overall, Diana is described as someone who changed royal traditions through simple but powerful choices. She brought more openness, emotion, and humanity into royal life. Her actions affected how people saw the royal family, and her influence continued even after her death through her children and the plans she left behind. What do you think about the legacy of Princess Diana? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for staying with us as we explored the life and legacy of Princess Diana. If this deep dive into her life kept you engaged, do not forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to continue uncovering more stories.